might all be zoomed out and virtual meetinged out to some degree. So I'm keeping that front of mind. I'm just going to speak for a few minutes, and then I want to get quickly over to our Q&A. And I really just want to pick up where Alex left off there on that nice intro. We did meet at basically, the World Aquatic Health Conference, was the pool industry, the aquatics industry. You've got people who build pools, people who maintain pools, people who literally build the lane lines for pools and the ladders, and of course the chemistry, but also the people who build the Olympic-sized swimming pools, and the world of pools and spas, hot tubs and jacuzzis, and even float spas. This is an incredible conference, and like Alex said, I was invited to gone several times to speak about Blue Mind, and it was surprising to me how useful and surprising the science was, even for people who spend their living getting people in the water. That's their business. That's their passion. And Alex and I just sort of pulled a few chairs to the side and started talking about Blue Mind, and then eventually sharks and turtles, and our mutual friends who work in both of those fields, including Randall Arouse in Costa Rica, and of course Alex's passion for shark conservation and ocean conservation. But he was one of those rare guys that had, one foot in the aquatics and the pool, the built waters, I call it domestic waters, and 1 foot in the wild waters, and had no problem understanding the connection once the light switch was turned on and this concept of Blue Mind was explained. And so we've stayed friends, of course, and worked together on a number of things, including his events in Colorado related to fins attached and raising funds and support for shark conservation. So that's really the question. And how have we come so far away from what truly motivates most people? And when Alex and I chatted about this topic and what we might explore here, I kind of said that one of the things that's been on my mind for a long time, and especially now, is our basic ocean talking points are decades out of date, and I'm as much to blame for reusing out-of-date talking points as anyone. And preparing for this chat, just reviewing some of my own work, I look back on a keynote I gave at a Bioneers conference in 2007, and it was the biggest talk I had ever given in my life. And my talking points were spot on what I want to say that we need to update. So if I sound slightly harsh, I'm harshing on myself and everybody else. So just want to be clear that I say all these things out of kindness and concern for the ocean. So it goes something like this. This is the preamble that we often hear in the beginning of every ocean documentary that we hear in the beginning. We read in the beginning of every ocean book, and it's that we've got a planet covered with 71% water. We get half of the oxygen from the ocean, from the plankton. The ocean provides billions of jobs and billions of dollars worth of protein and seafood. It regulates climate, holds the vast majority of the biodiversity. And you can throw percentages and numbers like billions and millions, and large percentages behind all of those statistics. And then after we make that case, we usually, on the value of an ocean, we usually pivot to the bad news. But the ocean is in crisis, and we list all the ways that the ocean is in crisis. And then we typically make people feel a bit guilty about their contribution, whether it's what they drive or how they eat or their consumptive habits. And then we rest our case. That is pretty much the recipe that's used by most ocean orgs You can look on websites, you can look in things I've written, speeches I've given. And oftentimes, just kind of, it's the boilerplate, it's repeated. And we use that language almost exclusively, it seems like, whether it's a UN report or an Ocean Org report, a NOAA report, a National Fisheries Service, you name it, pick your favorite ocean entity, and they're probably starting their communication off that way, that 71% of the planet, half the oxygen, a whole lot of jobs. The problem with our framing there is that we leave out what truly motivates most people who work their whole lives to protect the ocean, the people who are even the leading voices or the strongest voices in their communities. And by that, I mean we leave out the cognitive, emotional, psychological, social, physical, creative, and spiritual health benefits, wellness benefits of healthy waters, lakes, rivers, and oceans. We just dial it right out. Kind of to make matters worse, not only do we leave that out, many of those factoids that we sort of feel like we have to say are either useless and irrelevant to most people's daily lives. The percentage of the planet covered by anything is not a useful piece of information, but it goes into our brain and we repeat it as if it's really super important. The idea that half of the oxygen, 50% of the oxygen comes from the ocean is factually incorrect and also pretty useless. Any numbers like billions and billions are just big numbers and not particularly useful. So we spend our narrow bandwidth, our elevator pitch, our preamble to our book or our preamble to our documentary on outdated, ineffective factoids. So I told you it'd be a little bit harsh. And then we pivot to fear, guilt, shame, sometimes anger, and sometimes even more factoids. And we're sometimes surprised that our communication doesn't work. That's the backdrop to where I started thinking about Blue Mind, going way back to 2007, and realizing, just looking at myself, and I think you might be able to do a similar thought exercise for yourself. When did you fall in love with the ocean? And why, and how, and who, where, who took you there? How did that feel? What were you doing? Chances are it was an actual ocean. It could have been a book. It could have been a film. It could have been photography. But chances are that the moment that hooked you, that has led you to be here on this conversation and be involved ever since you got hooked by the ocean and fell in love, that moment was probably a real ocean, real water, not a wild ocean, not the virtual kind. And that is all about our emotional connection. So the update to our ocean talking points is not to leave out the science, not to leave out the facts, not to leave out the bad news, not to avoid the fear and the guilt and the anger as necessary, but not to front load it and not to end with it. Because when you do that, the science is very clear, the communication science, the psychology, incredibly clear. If you're interested in that aspect, go to Google Scholar, look it up. You will find quickly that facts and fear are not the best long-term movement building communication strategies. They work for a sprint, they work for a campaign, but they don't necessarily build your movement. As a side note, I've done some work with nonprofits on how the campaign mindset, the approach we take, sometimes you can win a campaign but do damage to your own movement that you're a part of, and sometimes unknowingly. Sometimes you can build a successful organization and do damage to the movement that you say you're a part of. And that's more common than we realize. That's just a side note. And so the Blue Mind, Alex mentioned my book, Blue Mind. It is entirely available if you're willing to search for it online for free. You'll find every chapter online available. If you are if you're thinking Jay's trying to sell books, no, I want you to read and learn. I don't really care about the sales part. The easy way to get it is to go to the library and check it out, or find it used online for $2. Harder way to get it would be to piece it together. All the free chapters are excerpted all over the internet. So this idea of Blue Mind is meant to update our talking points around our lakes, our rivers, our oceans, to add to the value equation, get the talking points right and add to the value equation, because a vast pile of peer-reviewed scientific literature over the past decade tells us that healthy waters do amazing things for our physical, emotional, and social health. And I think Alex and I thought this would be an important message to share with you at this particular time in human history, because our emotional health has suffered greatly the past few months because of, obviously because of this global pandemic, which has led to a lot of fear, both of the virus, but also of the economic casualties, anger, anxiety, stress, all leading to burnout and depression. And so a healthy ocean, healthy waters, so in Colorado, the lakes, the rivers, along the coastlines, the oceans, the lakes and the rivers, is so important to our mental health right now. And when we leave that message largely out of our ocean talking points, both at the government agencies as well as the NGOs, we are undervaluing the ocean. And when we undervalue anyone or anything, bad things happen. We've got the value equation wrong. It's leading to an undervaluation because we leave out the vast and well-documented emotional, physical, social wellness benefits. So that's really the main work of Blue Mind, is to bring together the science that backs up that bold statement, and the researchers, and especially the practitioners who are taking Blue Mind science and putting it into action. And I'll give you a few examples. So on the research side, I would say the University of Exeter Medical School is doing the best research in the world right now. They have an interdisciplinary team of toxicologists, epidemiologists, statisticians, geographers, psychologists, neuroscientists, ecologists, working together to better understand all of the values that we derive from a healthy ocean. Not just the economic benefits, not just the ecological benefits, but also the emotional and physical and social health benefits. And I think that's very important. So if you're interested in the research, a good place to start would be the Blue Health program at the University of Exeter Medical School. Second piece is who's putting Blue Mind science into practice. And there are so many great organizations, and I would encourage every ocean conservation organization to put Blue Mind science into practice. Update your talking points, but practice it. Share this message. We're seeing veterans working with various organizations doing dive therapy. We're seeing surf therapy, open water swim therapy, flotation therapy, not just for veterans, but also first responders, frontline health practitioners, your average burnt out, stressed out, middle-aged scientists, kids at risk, youth, stressed out high schoolers. And I pretty much can say we all need some Blue Mind right now in our lives. We all need a little more Blue Mind. I've never met anybody who said I could use a little less Blue Mind and I'd like a little more Red Mind. So Red Mind refers to our new normal, which is anxious, stressed, distracted, overstimulated, falling behind, too much information overload. So our screens are a major part of our lives, lots of advertising, lots of information. news, bad news all day sometimes for some people. That keeps us kind of constantly in the fight or flight mode, which is perfectly fine if it's just an occasional mode. But if you're stuck in red mind, you will burn out, and that's gray mind. If you're sustained red mind too long, you will burn out, you will break down, and you'll find a pile of ashes, metaphorically, after all that red mind burning. And so the antidote, both pre-coronavirus and during and after, has always been, among other things, water. As Alex said, it could be the bathtub in your home or your shower. It could be a pool or a spa that you may have access to. It could be an urban fountain or water sculpture in your community, in your city. It could be an urban waterfront. It could be a lakefront or riverfront or an oceanfront. It could obviously be the oceans, the lakes, and the rivers themselves. All forms of water will move you out of that red mind mode, help you avoid gray mind, and keep you from really burning out, or at least help you from burning out. And I know I don't want to ever overstate the case or suggest that blue mind is an alternative to other modes of healing and therapies. It's a complement. And if you are on a medication to treat a disease, a disorder, or an injury, adding blue mind therapy to your regimen will speed your recovery. It's not an either or, it's a yes and. So the veterans that we work with, many of them are on lots of pharmaceuticals. If they get engaged sustainably with surf therapy and blue mind therapy, many of them, not necessarily all of them, are able to dial back on the chemicals that they're ingesting. And those may be pharmaceuticals, they may also be alcohol and drugs, and utilize their own neurochemistry through activities like surfing and diving. And that's pretty darn exciting. And you don't have to have post-traumatic stress or anxiety disorder for blue mind to benefit you. And so right now, maybe you don't have access to a park or a wild body of water. And so you're saying, okay, what do I do? I'm stuck at home. The easiest thing to do is take an inventory of all the kinds of sources of blue mind that are within 50 feet of where you're sitting right now. So sinks, tubs, showers, pools, spas, if you're lucky to have access to a pool or a spa, outdoor hoses, sprinklers, as the case may be, but then virtual blue mind. So making music about water, artwork, photography, painting, poetry. I think of Mary Oliver and Pablo Neruda, all the various prose, from Moby Dick to my book, Blue Mind. Pick up a book about water and read it. It will calm you down, assuming it isn't, I don't know, a book about the Titanic or something. And so there's virtual blue mind, there's domestic blue mind, there's wild blue mind, and urban blue mind. And we all have access to some of it. And the next thing to do would be to prioritize your blue mind activity every day in some way or another. So for some people, that'll mean turning on a 10-hour long video of a stormy ocean, a thunderstorm over an ocean, to help them sleep. For some people, it'll be prioritizing bath time. If you can walk safely and participate in aquatic activities and sports, surfing, paddleboarding, diving, swimming, all those things, do that. But build that into your daily routine, and it will help with your stress, with your focus. And I'll say one of the added benefits is that your smartphones, your technology, your laptops, certainly your desktop, they don't like water at all. Very high level of incompatibility, unless of course you have an underwater housing. But I'm going to recommend that when you go for some blue mind time, that you leave the technology behind and you try to fully immerse. But an added advantage of blue mind is that it is one of the last places where we can achieve solitude and true privacy that remain on the planet. And the psychological benefits of privacy and solitude are also enormous. It's part of that emotional toolkit that we need. And so back to where we started, we have a set of ocean talking points that are factual. They're sometimes a little bit off. 50% of the oxygen is not correct. Sometimes they're a little bit boring. And it's not easy to make the ocean boring, but a lot of people have done a pretty good job of making the ocean boring. Don't be one of those people. It's not cool. Making something like the ocean boring is just not helpful. We need to motivate people to care more. We need to build the value equation so that that it's accurate, that we're not undervaluing the ocean. And so when you stop and think about the water in your life, the lakes, the rivers, and the oceans, and their true value, of course, there's economic value, there's jobs, there's products, there's commodities, there's extraction, there's seafood. Of course, there's ecological value, vast, biodiversity, and all the incredible plants, animals, algae, microscopic organisms that thrive in our oceans. There's an ecological value, and there's an educational value. But do not leave out the emotional wellness benefits, that value. And we usually do. And so that's where kind of the point I really want to make is that if you're in a position to communicate and you're communicating about the value of healthy oceans, don't leave out the sense of peace and freedom that being near in, on, and underwater gives us. There isn't a more important time to feel that way than right now. Don't leave out the romance that we feel at the ocean, whether we're alone or with somebody that we adore. Don't leave out the creativity that being in the water or near the water, even the shower, that the boost of creativity that we get in those places. Don't leave out the privacy and the solitude, extremely valuable. So the mental and emotional health benefits of our waters are an underprescribed, undervalued benefit for all of us. And I just reiterate that that's been true forever. It's especially true these months here. And we have a long road ahead of people dealing with the burnout from the pandemic, people dealing with the economic fallout and the burnout and the depression and all of that. I'm not really afraid to talk about the mental health impacts of this pandemic. But as ocean communicators and ocean advocates and ocean stewards and educators, if we're not teaching every single person about their blue mind, helping them access their blue mind, and then helping them practice it, hopefully daily, we're not doing our job. Our talking points need to be updated. Our mission statements need to be updated. Our science desperately needs to be updated. So to that point, I wrote this in 2014. Even back then, 31 pages of lit cit, so citations that are used throughout the book, 31 pages. Since this time, 6 years later, there's just a mountain of research on blue health, blue mind, blue space. If you go to Google Scholar and look up any of those terms, you'll have a lot of fun catching up if you're not that familiar with the research. It's fascinating and really useful. So that's my pitch, I guess, my rant, my advice. I'm mostly interested in the questions that may be popping into your head, and I suggest that you don't be shy about them. I'd love to hear how you are personally putting Blue Mind into action to take care of yourself, because a burnt out ocean advocate is not useful. A completely stressed, so I guess I should make this point. Red mind is useful, but when you're in fight or flight response, you're not at your best. You may be able to run faster, you may be able to scream louder, but you're not at your best as a creative, problem-solving, collaborative person. it's just not the way your brain works. You're at your best in your blue mind mode as far as creative problem solving. And it goes without saying that you're certainly not at your best when you're in gray mind, when you're burned out, when you're broken down and you're numbed by it all. You're not at your best. So you owe it to yourself to practice blue mind, and then you owe it to those around us to share what you learn from that. And the last thing I would do if we were in a proper classroom or meeting room, you would all have one of these with you. And so we're going to have to go virtual in this case and hand you a virtual blue marble. So if I could, I would pass this to you through your screen, this blue marble. If you're on a phone, you should know that I just handed you a blue marble. And that blue marble represents this conversation. We've shared 1 million of them around the world. It's on the spine of the book. The last chapter describes in detail why we use this iconic symbol to propel this conversation. If you have a blue marble, you're meant to pass it on to someone that you want to say thank you to and share your version of what it means and the message, and then the marbles get passed hand to hand. We're in virtual marble mode right now because of obvious reasons. Last thing I want to say is more of an announcement, is that yesterday we launched the 7th annual 100 Days of Blue Mind Challenge, which simply asks people to practice Blue Mind daily and share their story. And that may mean reflecting on a previous experience. It may mean getting in the water that that day, a pool, a lake, a river, an ocean. It may mean sharing a piece of artwork or a song or a quote, but a daily drumbeat of people sharing Blue Mind. Use the Blue Mind hashtag, and people all over the world join in throughout the 100 days. Some learn about it in the middle and just jump in. Some don't miss a single day, and they just post or share or swim or surf or dive every day and tell their stories. So you can join us starting today, become part of the Blue Mind groundswell, we call it, and help us make this really simple idea that, as Alex said, is so simple, so obvious, but sometimes eludes us even after a lifetime of ocean advocacy. We still sometimes leave it out, and we do want to make it common knowledge, this idea of Blue Mind, which means every kid learns it in school, every adult teaches it to the children in their lives, and we practice it. Our health practitioners understand it and prescribe time at the sea, time at the river, time at the lake for those who need it most, which is all of us right now. So those are my words for now. I think we should, Alex is probably we can curate questions you may have. Alex, you may have a question right out the gate there, and then we can see if people want to pop their questions up. We'll talk about those.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that, Jay. Yeah, it's so remarkable to me. You know, when you talk about the kids and how excited kids get, you know, when they're around water. I mean, I was born on an island in the Mediterranean, and I mean, that was the highlight of our life growing up on that island. You know, we'd go down to the beach, and you know, we couldn't wait to just run down on the sand and jump in that water. It was just an incredible feeling for kids and for me, you know, growing up in my early days on the island, surrounded by water. So don't underestimate the power of water with your kids as well, and exposing your kids to the water. I love the fact that you gave us some good talking points, because I was going to ask. You said, you know, we don't want to talk about the doom and gloom, and there's plenty of doom and gloom around us, that, you know, negativity breeds negativity kind of thing, and so to talk about the positive things. And what's important to me is, I don't know if you can touch a little bit more on the emotional connection, right? Because people make decisions based on emotions, not based on logic, right? So if we want to attract people to the ocean, attract people to experience marine life, expose people, in my case, to sharks, and to give people the real story about sharks, you know, how do we really connect with people on the emotional level and not just say, oh, you know, 100 million sharks are being finned every year, you've got to help.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's key. And I'm a scientist, so I'm into the science, I'm into the facts, I'm into the logic, and I know it's not enough. And so I know you are as well. And so the message is not let's get rid of the science and the logic. Let's expand our understanding. And it turns out the science of emotion is probably your best tool. And there's a great book by Antonio Damasio, who's a neuroscientist at UCLA, and it's called Descartes' Error. And he wrote it in 1992, and I read it when it came out, and then tried to apply it to my work in ocean conservation. And here's the summary of the book. All decisions, every single decision has an emotional component. You cannot do the act of deciding without your emotional apparatus that's on board in your brain. You will never make a decision without emotion. And this is a neuroscientist who studies decision science saying, hey, don't pretend that emotion isn't important. It in fact is. Of course, we want the best available science. But moving people, particularly moving them into the status that we call movement building, is more than fear and more than facts. Those are useful tools and useful emotions. But it really is important. I mean, we go around the room here, and like I know Randall well. Randall is a motivated man. He's in fact unstoppable, and I've seen the world try to stop him. They cannot stop him. He will go burrow under, go around, jump over, or put his head down and run through any wall that's in front of him. He's unstoppable. And he's not unstoppable because, hey, they pay me the big bucks to be unstoppable like a football player. He's unstoppable because of his heart, because of his passion, because of his commitment and his caring. And that comes from somewhere. And it generally doesn't come from a book. As an author, it generally doesn't come from scientific journals. As a scientist, it's hard to say that, but it's true. It comes from something else. And so Alex, you light up when you talk about your childhood at the sea. Like you light up, and it lights up the room, virtually or literally. So at a podium, you light up a room when you tell those stories because people empathize. They say, me too. My experience was a river. My experience was a pool, but I had the same feeling when I jumped in it as a kid. I felt whole. For me, I was a introvert. I stuttered, but in the pool underwater, I felt whole somehow. So I love being underwater. It gave me, I felt better than on land. And a lot of us have had that experience. When you're eye to eye with a shark, when you're eye to eye with a turtle, fortunate to have those experiences, or a whale, or a seabird, or a fish on a reef, it gives you this feeling of awe. And the scientists who study the science of awe, they tell us that feeling we call awe and wonder switches us into a different mode. I call it blue mind. That in that mode that it switches us, that feeling of awe when you're face to face with a wild animal and you just have respect for it, it makes you rethink your life in a good way. It makes you feel small in a good way. It makes you feel empathetic in a good way. So awe creates empathy. And so these experiences of awe that we have as marine biologists or explorers or guides or educators fuel us. So understanding that that is what fuels us is important if we're trying to fuel a movement.
Yep.
If we leave that out and say, hey, let's use fear and factoids, we're leaving out our best tool. So I know what makes my colleagues unstoppable, and it's not money and it's not facts. Although we need money to do our work and we need the facts to do our work correctly, what motivates us is far deeper, and it is in the realm of what we call blue mind. Yeah.
It is. It absolutely is. That's great. So we have a couple of questions. Caden, does spending time in the water relieve stress and anxiety even after you have left the water, or is it more supposed to be a time to cool off in the moment?
All of the above. That's a really, really good question. I would even extend it to before. So if you've ever been planning a trip, a dive trip, a surf trip, even just a trip to go for a swim, as soon as you start thinking about being in the water, you start to feel better. So, I mean, as soon as you start telling them the story about your plan, your imagination goes to work and those neurochemicals kick in, and you start to feel a little lighter on your feet and a little more motivated, maybe a little more creative, maybe a little more connected, maybe even a little more pleasant as a result. And you haven't even touched the water yet. So, if I said, hey, start describing the water you're going to go to next after you're allowed to leave home, if you've been stuck at home, you will start to light up like Alex did, talking about his childhood. I see it all the time and I feel it all the time. So as soon as if you're going surfing, as soon as you pull the board down and get the wax and find your wetsuit, your body's already shifted to blue mind mode. Of course, while you're doing it, assuming that you're safe and enjoying it, you're experiencing that. And then afterwards as well. And with the thing about surfing, one of the things surfers like to do most is sit around and talk about the waves that they surfed in the past. Because they sit around and they tell stories and they relive the experience. Biologists do that too. You go to a conference and you find a gang of people over in the corner and they're just talking about sharks. There are no sharks. It's just the conference room. Yeah. And they're just telling stories. And
even with divers, right? You see that with divers. After the dive, they can't stop talking about what they saw on the dive at the dinner table or back up on the boat, or so you're right. So it's the before, during, and after. It's a continuation there. So that's a great question, Caden.
Caden, I'll add one more piece, is that our art, music, photography, film makes that feeling portable. So when you leave the water, you can't take the water with you, but you can create a photograph or a painting or a song or a poem or a film, and then you can take that and share it. So art makes the awe that we're trying to create portable, and that's why I have so much respect for the photographers and the filmmakers and the people who sing about the ocean. Jack Johnson, Jimmy Buffett. The poets and the writers who write so beautifully about their experiences, they make the awe portable. You can't be underwater all the time. So you want to take it with you. How do you take it with you? Well, film, photography, artwork, poetry, music makes that portable. And so, especially now, if you're stuck at home, fire it up. Fire up your favorite dive film. The Big Blue is one of my favorites. Just makes me happy to watch it. Makes me happy to tell people to watch it. I have a Blue Mind playlist on Spotify. If I'm feeling a little red-minded or gray-minded, I'll just pop on my Blue Mind playlist, and it's a whole bunch of different artists singing about rivers and water and oceans, and you can probably predict a few of what the songs that would be.
People can also subscribe to the Fins Attached YouTube channel and watch our videos.
Yes. Yeah, it's great. And I'll say that those videos they're the big blockbuster ocean films, which are beautiful, but the ones that get me the most are the ones that are just like, I'd say, a little scrappier, a little more down in the elements, and a little more of the homemade. Like, if you made the video, go watch those. Watch the videos you made, because those will move you more than any professional production, I think, personally. Look at the photographs you took. There's a gazillion beautiful photographs on Instagram But the ones that move me, the one that moves me in particular is the one of my daughter on her first dive. That is the most beautiful underwater photograph ever taken, in my opinion. Probably not in your opinion. But that photo of her underwater, she's got a blue marble, and she had gone through a pretty serious health crisis, and we weren't sure if she would even, be on this planet. To be able to dive with her and have a photograph of her underwater is just like the most beautiful photograph ever taken. So those images make this blue mind feeling portable. So thanks for that question, Caden.
So his follow-up question is, so how much oxygen actually does come from the ocean?
Yeah, very. I mean, look, that's a more challenging question to answer than it sounds like. So some estimates say as much as 80%, 85, clearly more than half. And the other piece of that, and I don't want to, we don't need to rewrite all of the websites and everything that say every other breath comes from the ocean, but it doesn't work that way. That's somewhat misleading and confusing when you say it that way. Every other breath doesn't come from the ocean. That's just a metaphor. And even in unhealthy, I mean, we're in no danger of running out of oxygen, I guess is probably, it's just a bad talking point, frankly, as a scientist. It's not useful. It gets your attention. It's like, yeah, the ocean gives us a lot of oxygen. Moving on, let's come up with some things that the oxygen's not at risk, in our lifetimes or any future lifetimes that we can possibly imagine. There's another thing kind of hidden in that statement there is I have found when I give talks about good news makes some people really uncomfortable. They feel like if we talk about good news and what works, we're somehow going to lose our edge. And I think that's just that's an illness. That's an emotional illness that I think some people suffer from. It's kind of an addiction to bad news. I don't want to be part of that club, frankly. The bad news addicts club is not my crew. I want to study what works. Sometimes that's good news. I refer to Randall again. He's had some great victories. Let's study them. What worked, what didn't. We've all had heartbreaks, but let's really talk about. Let's drill down to maybe what works isn't the obvious part of it. Maybe it was a conversation with the kid of a political leader that led to, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that we need to really study our successes on a whole other level, not just the science, but the social aspects, the emotional aspects of our successes. I think of all the fishermen in Latin America that participate in sea turtle conservation. Sometimes just because they do it for pride and dignity. That's interesting, as a motivator. It's not just cash. It's not just a financial incentive. It's the same motivation that each of us has. We're humans. We love this place. And so that's my thing is let's study what works. Let's talk about the good news. We don't want to avoid the actual crises, of course.
No.
But let's not just go around bumming everybody out all the time. Because the bummed out brain is not creative, it's not collaborative, it's not connected, it's gray mind, not useful, really. So.
Yep. So Cassidy, can you please elaborate about how the sound of water can calm, relax people, whether it be the ocean, the shower, or the fountain? The sound of water is so fascinating. I totally agree.
Yeah, so you can look at the frequency. We've been involved with some pretty interesting research on the sound of water. So first and foremost is the simplest thing. The sound of the water masks the sound that may be distracting and disturbing. So just start with that. Being by the water, listening to the water, you're not listening to traffic, you're not listening to sirens. So it's as much what you take away. So the act of going to the water or getting in the shower removes some of the often disturbing noise, noisy, distracting, stress-causing noise. So there's that. So it's not even the sound of the water that's doing it, it's the lack of the other sounds that is really helpful. So then when you get into the sound of water, work with a group as a company called Plantronics, and they make headsets, they make speaker phone, electronics company. And they were interested in this very question: how does water mask noise? And they found that in the workplace, the #1 source of stress was noise, and the #1 source of noise was human voices, coworkers, conversations you were not a part of that you really didn't want to overhear, that you had to overhear. So they tried some technologies to mask it. They tried white noise, which is just, you know, the misdialed radio, or just the, you know, that white noise everybody's familiar with, which worked, but it actually drove people crazy. So if you listen to white noise too long, you'll go nuts. Then they did semi-structured white noise, which is called pink noise or brown noise. And then they moved into what I call blue noise, which technically is not the right term, but the sound of water masks the human voice better than anything. And then they start pumping that through the building, and they found that people had less anxiety related to noise when they had the sound of water. But then they created another problem, which was when you hear the sound of water coming out of the ceiling, you may be distracted. Why is there a river in the ceiling? Why is the ocean sound coming out of the ceiling? That might be a problem. And so what they did is they put they recorded the sound of the water wall fountain in the lobby, and then that's the sound that followed you through the building. So my point here, sorry for being long-winded about it, but is that the sound works even better when there's a visual cue attached to it. So when you saw the fountain, and you heard it, and then that sound followed you to the 6th floor of building 3, it kind of tricked your brain into thinking you could still somehow hear that fountain. So you had the visual association with it, which is why for me, I listen if I'm traveling. At home, I can hear the ocean, very fortunate. When I'm traveling, sometimes there's noise. I can't get to sleep, and I can't hear the ocean. So I put on a YouTube video, and there's all kinds of apps. I like the YouTube videos because there's some long playing 10-hour ones that start out and you see the ocean. It's a night ocean. You see the waves, and you see that glow, and then you hear it, and then you dim the screen, but you got the visual that goes with the auditory. And for me, that helps me just believe the sound, that it's not some dude with GarageBand making an ocean soundtrack, that it's an actual recording of the surf or of the river. So back to the question, blue mind, when we're in that blue mind mode, auditorily and visually, our world is simplified. So the visual stimulation, the auditory stimulation is simplified. So things are taken away necessarily when you're at the edge of the pool, the lake, the river, the ocean. And when you get in, you also get back some bandwidth somatically. So your body doesn't have to deal with gravity once you're in the water. You're floating, or you're diving, and you adjust your buoyancy, and you're just like gliding along. So you get rid of the gravity. Right now where you're sitting, I assume people are sitting. If you're flat out on your back, this is there'd be a slightly different story. You're processing my voice. You're processing some visuals. There may be some background noise. You're making sense of language. You're posing questions. There may be music in the background. You're processing all of that auditorily. The visual stimulation in the room around you. Maybe you've got 3 screens open and you're listening to this, but you're also playing some video game. I don't know what you're doing. Maybe there's people, animals running around, who knows? You're processing the visual stimulation. Maybe your room is cluttered. Maybe you're in a library and there's lots of books. And then your body is using about 200 muscles to sit there. If you stop doing that, you would fall out of your chair. So your body is actually in balance, holding your position right now. It's holding your head up straight. It's holding your arms where they are. It's keeping your back somewhat straight. you're doing all of that all the time, even when you're quote unquote relaxing, like we are hopefully right now. When you get into the water, auditorily, visually, and somatically, you get that bandwidth back. And that's awesome. Your brain doesn't just chuck it out the window, you puts it to good use. And that's where the creativity comes from. That's the aha moment. You go, wow, I always get these great ideas in the shower. Why does that occur? Because you've given yourself bandwidth. Your subconscious uses that bandwidth. You make connections, and then they get kicked into your consciousness. And you go, aha, I got the solution. I don't know how I got it. It just popped in my head while I'm sitting in here in the bathtub at the shower. An important thing in those
That's
moments.
how time travel was invented, right? The flux capacitor, that was in the falling in the shower.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the great neurologist Oliver Sacks says, the late great neurologist who motivated me to write this book, by the way, he said I got my best ideas. He had so many great ideas. A great writer, great scientist. He said he got his best ideas while swimming, lakes, rivers, oceans, pools. So he always had a legal pad on the table, on the picnic table, or on the side of the pool, because when he got his ideas, he didn't want to forget them. And so he'd jot them down, all wet and stuff. He'd have, wet pad. My pro tip is keep our kids when they were little had these crayons, bath crayons. Keep bath crayons in your shower. So when you have that idea in the shower, you can write it on the wall, and then you can take a picture of it. Otherwise, it will go away. We've all been there. We go, I've got the new lyric to the song I've been working on. You're like, I'll remember it. You get out of the shower, you dry off, and you're like, oop, where'd it go? It is gone. So, and you might think this is the best idea I've ever had in my life. I'll remember it, and then you don't. So shower crayons.
So we have a few more. We've got about 5 minutes to go. That's great to hear, Dennis, that it's your sanctuary from PTSD. And I know there's actually some, research, neurological research being done with PTSD military folks diving with sharks and how sharks really affects them. So there's that ongoing research. So that's great to hear that it's helping you. Scuba Steve mentioned the photo. That's right. So basically confirming what you were saying there, Jay, about your favorite photo. When will your second book come out, Jay? That's a question.
Yeah, I'm working on a collection of essays called Live Blue, and it's been I'd say delayed, but I'm glad because I'm going to go back and revisit the concept a bit through this new lens that I'm not quite ready to call it the new normal, but I think there's a new set of insights from what we're all experiencing right now that will sharpen the way I describe Blue Mind through this next book. And so I want to respect that. I have several friends who are authors whose books just came out last month and this month, and they're dealing with just a whole new distribution experience and no book talks. Those are all canceled. Some really wonderful books that they've been working on for many years. And so I want to respect kind of that. I don't want to just put my head down and plow through and put out something that I regret. But basically it's 100 essays on how to put Blue Mind into action throughout our lives. So from birth all the way through death. And that's the framing of it. Live Blue. How do we live like this? We have this great conversation, but how do we do it? And there's a question about red mind, gray mind, and blue mind, and I want to say that's a purposefully oversimplification of a very complex set of states of mind and neurochemistry. And I'm trained as an evolutionary biologist, not a neurochemist. So it is purposefully an oversimplification to get us talking about those three states of mind.
Yeah.
Because people don't like to talk about their mental health very easily, especially, I'm gonna be a little bit sexist here, but dudes have a hard time talking about how they feel. That's changed, thankfully, in maybe the younger generations, but we'll say like older guys have a hard time talking about how they feel. And if you can have a color-coded, simple way of saying, I'm feeling a little too much red mind, I might be going into gray mind, I need more blue mind. And working with veterans, what they explain to me is they toggle back and forth between red, which is their normal, and gray, which is their burnout. And when they get out of burnout, they go right back into red, which is their comfort zone. Being on, being vigilant, being fight or flight response, being aggressive as necessary, but like on a pin, right?
Yeah.
That's their normal. So it's red and gray. And then when they are veterans, they need to figure out how to get between red and blue and toggle back and forth between red and blue mind, because red mind is really useful. If you stay in blue mind all the time, you become like Jeff Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont. Like, dude, my dad has an awesome set of tools. Like that's his whole. He's a surfer and a stoner, and he's in blue mind all the time. That's not that productive. Let's just say, funny maybe, but you can't just live in blue mind all the time, and you can't live in gray mind all the time. I mean, red mind. So that color coding is in fact an oversimplification of the science, but it's a useful starting point for conversation. So that's why I like it.
Well, we had some great comments there. Great, those comments from Dennis, and you've tried to change since you're in Colorado and you can't go diving all the time, and bringing water into your life. Thanks for your kind words, Cassidy, Susie, also Cable. Thank you for that. My challenge as a conservationist in charge of this nonprofit called Fins Attached, I've been trying to do more on the emotional side. I'll let the scientists talk about the scientists. I'll let Mauricio talk about the science. I'll let Randall talk about the science, and James and Alex and all those other people talk about the science. For me, the challenge is to attract more people, right? The old cliche, you protect what you love kind of thing. So, for me, the challenge is to connect with people on the emotional level where they want to be a part of this movement, where they connect with the water, they connect with the marine life, and they connect with the beauty and the majesty and the power of these animals. And, and then, a splattering of that, look what we're doing to them kind of thing. But it's more on the emotional side to get people to love the ocean more and to love the life in the ocean more on an emotional level, to get more people to basically bring about change. So, and what you're doing, Jay, is helping with that. The whole blue mind concept. Again, folks, whenever you're tagging something, hashtag blue mind, but the whole idea of the blue mind, and giving people this realization about the power of water, and that's great to hear from Cable. Now he's got the connection, right? Now he understands the pull of water has had on him, and so so this is great stuff. And so
yeah, I appreciate what you're doing and your style, and the science is on your side. The neuropsychology says what you're doing is the right way. So keep doing that. And we kind of scratched the surface here, but if people want to get in touch, just please reach out. If you're not much of a reader, we have some video versions of the book that'll get you through and give you all the information that's in the book, but in a interview and video, more documentary style. And no matter where you are, there's water nearby. So make a quick inventory of your own personal sources of blue mind, right, and use them. And that's the big thing. We can talk all day on calls and stuff, but really where the rubber hits the road is in the practice of blue mind.
That's right.
So prioritize it. And the last thing I want to say is so important. Alex mentioned the kids. Imagine if every kid on the planet learned about what is blue mind, how do I access it, and how do I practice it regularly, wherever they are in the world. It would be amazing. And kids are being told that they're inheriting a broken planet and that they have to figure out how to fix it. and that's causing them a lot of stress. That's not cool.
No.
You should not cause an 11-year-old that much stress. Greta Van Thunberg, she lost 20 pounds before she became sort of famous. She got very anxious and very depressed and lost 20 pounds off of her relatively small frame body. And we can't do that to our kids. And so we need to give them the tools to stay buoyant, to stay collaborative, to stay creative, and to stay connected. And Blue Mind is one of those tools, along with music, you know, and a good dog. I'd say maybe combine all of them. It's the best. Like music by the water with your pup. I mean, it's medicine. But we need to teach our kids how to take care of themselves and their mental health and emotional health, so they can be
to have that joy in their lives. You know, let's not, like you said, let's not stress them out that they've got to solve the problems we've created. You know, they may do that, but you know, let's do it in a more positive way. Appreciate it, Jay. Thank you for the time. I'm sure we'll do this again at some point in the future. We'll need to get you out on a expedition on shark water one of these days.
I'd love to join you.
Help us tag some sharks and turtles. So appreciate everything that you're doing. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you.